Yes, good afternoon. My name is Cameron Wood. I'm a member of the Office of Legislative Counsel. I am here to convene and call to order the first meeting of the Joint Public Pension Oversight Committee. It is November 13th, 2025. Your first order of business should be to elect a chair of the committee. However, before we do that, I figured I would give you the opportunity to go around and introduce yourselves. So, starting in the room.
Hi, I'm Emily Kornheiser. I'm the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, and I'm from Brattleboro.
Representative Matt Byron, Chair of House Government Operations and Military Affairs. I am from Virginia.
Andrew Perchlik, Chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee from Marshfield.
I will yield to Senator Vyhovsky.
Senator Tanya Vyhovsky, I represent the Chittenden Central District.
Senator Collimore from Rutland. I chair government operations and also sit on Senate Agriculture.
Great. As I mentioned, your first order of business should be to elect a chair of the committee. And the committee is made up of 3 House members and 3 members of the Senate. Looking for nominations for individuals who would like to be chair. Yes, sir.
I think Senator Collimore has a hand up.
Good.
Thank you, Representative Kornheiser. And I would like to nominate Representative Kornheiser to be the chair for the ensuing session.
We have 1 nomination. Do we have any other nominations? Seeing none, allow for any discussion before you all would like to vote.
I'd like to thank Senator Collimore for the nomination and hope that the Senate can return to chairing next biennium. The turn taking is lovely.
Okay. With that, we have 1 nomination, so we'll just open it up to vote. All those in favor of Representative Kornheiser being elected chair of the committee, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Madam Chair, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. I believe next up, we need to elect a vice chair. Do we have any nominations?
If I may,
Mhm.
I'd like to take the opportunity to please nominate Senator Collimore as vice chair of the committee for the upcoming session.
Thank you. Any further nominations? Seeing none, is there any discussion? Senator Collimore, do you consent to being the vice chair?
I do indeed, and look forward to working with you.
Fantastic. In that case, all those in favor of Senator Collimore as the vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And Senator Collimore, thank you for being vice chair. Next up, we need to elect a clerk who perhaps could even record these lovely votes that we have taken post talk. Senator Perchlik, are you interested in nominating Representative Byron?
I would like to make a nomination for clerk. Is that what we're doing?
Mhm.
I would nominate Representative Byron for clerk.
Thank you. Representative Byron has been nominated clerk. Are there any further nominations? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? And thank you very much. Representative Byron. Thank you, Cameron.
You're welcome.
David and Tim, would you like to join us?
I'll start with a brief introduction.
Great, thank you.
All
We're
right.
so excited to have you here in your new capacity.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, David Scher, Deputy Treasurer. And my testimony today is going to be very brief, mostly just to introduce myself as the new Deputy Treasurer, and then turn it over to Tim Duggan, who will give the substantive overview of the state retirement systems and pension benefit systems. For a little background for the committee, David Scher, immediate prior, I have many different roles in state government and recently in the federal government. And does that make sense to you, Madam Chair, to give a brief overview and then turn it over?
Yes, absolutely. We've
All
been
right,
working
so-
with you a lot and we're glad to hear more about you.
That sounds great. And I've worked with many of you already, but just very briefly, had a number of different roles in state government, started out as a public defender for a number of years, worked in the Attorney General's office for a while on criminal justice policy matters, was then general counsel to the Cannabis Control Board, and most recently was state director for Congresswoman Becca Balint. And now I'm very excited to have been asked by Treasurer Jppoc to serve as his deputy. And so I'll be in that role, and I look forward to working with you all this session. Happy to answer any questions, but I will leave the substantive testimony to Mr. Duggan.
You already have your job figured out. It's perfect.
Yes, exactly.
I have a
Yes.
question that maybe is more appropriate to you than to Mr. Duggan, and that is the treasurer sends out this, I call it the ADAC letter, but doesn't send it to this committee, which seems a little bit strange, but does CC some of the members of the committee, but like our chair is not CC'd on this letter. And this letter seems to be important for the pensions. So I don't know if it's a fault of the legislation says where this letter goes, or if we could do anything just to maybe have the treasurer send this to the Pension Oversight Committee every year. I assume this is an annual letter that goes to the governor and CC'd these other folks. So maybe it's a suggestion, but if the suggestion is if we need legislation to change it, then I'd be welcome to learn that.
I mean, yeah, you can.
Okay, then let's wait.
I'm also
Pause
sure that we
one moment while everyone changes their seats.
I'll just say briefly, I'm sure we can, whatever the legislation says, I'm sure we can be helpful in sending it to whoever may benefit from getting it in the legislature. So
Thank you.
I'll turn it over. Thank you.
Because I think it would be, I think the valuation reports that were, those are the documents for this meeting are helpful, but they're very dense. And it's helpful to have Tim walk us through and explain what they say, but the letter does a good job of giving you a quick overview as well.
Thanks.
Afternoon, Tim Duggan, Director of the Vermont Retirement Systems. I have a couple paper copies. Anybody? Paper people?
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Usually there's a paper person.
Thought there might be. So I'm here today to talk about where we are with the retirement systems. And just to follow up on your question, Senator Perchlik, I think in statute, the letters are directed to the chairs of GovOps committees and appropriations committees, but I think it's perfectly appropriate, as Deputy Treasurer Scher said, to send it to whoever will be useful. And I think that was in place before this body was created. Okay. So we'll start making that a practice. And coming up soon, we will have our OPEB ADEC letters. And so we'll make sure to correct that for those.
Thanks.
Great.
Sure. I may share my screen. Great. So this is our evaluation season, I think of, and it's where we get our annual checkups, report cards, whatever you want to call them, on our pension systems. And so it's a great time for us to come and visit you and tell you where we are. And so what I'd like to do is just walk through some background first, then talk through for the pension systems, where we are at the end of fiscal year 25 and going into the fiscal 27 budget year. Do the same for our retiree health care systems, which we call our OPEB systems, and then give a little preview about what's coming ahead for us, some of the work we've been doing and are planning to do. So let's make this bigger, and there we go. So in the treasurer's office, and we manage a number of retirement systems, but we're going to focus here on our defined benefit systems. We have 3 defined benefit pension systems: our state, our teachers, and our municipal systems. And they're funded a little bit differently. The municipal system is funded by the municipalities and municipal employees, whereas the state and teachers are funded by the state and the respective employees. And for our retiree health insurance plans, those are funded fully by the state for both the state and the teachers' plans. Often we go right into funding and fiscal matters in this committee, but I wanted to just take a minute and think about what our pension systems do for us. They provide great value to the state and to its residents. They're a key tool for our public sector employers. They're a tool to retain and recruit public servants. When in retirement, people aren't getting rich on these pensions. They provide a modest, but it's consistent retirement. In a day and age where more and more people are in 401ks, defined benefit pension system provides a consistent payment, come rain or shine. And in that way, they provide great certainty and dignity in retirement for our public servants. And importantly, they're an economic driver. I often like to think about these pension systems as, one of our biggest economic development plans because they about 75% of our beneficiaries remain in state. And from the map on the side, you can see that they're spread out throughout the state. And there's an outfit called NIRS, National Institute for Retirement Security. It's a think tank in DC, and they do these biannual pensionomics reports where they look at each state and they calculate how much taxpayer funds that are put into retirement systems deliver economic activity in the state and what that multiplier is. And in the most recent one, they developed about $4.50 for every dollar we put in. That's in retirees spending money in their communities all around the state. So these, and then that generates taxes for the state, that generates, small businesses. So it's a really important tool, both for the public servants who use it, the employers who rely on it, and the Vermont economy as a whole. I love this graphic. I think it's a great way to understand how we fund these systems. Fundamentally, the baseline level formula is the contributions that employees and employers put in, plus the investment earners, have to equal the benefits and expenses. There's no magic here. Oftentimes we get into all these complicated actuarial assumptions, formulas, but at core, it's a really simple idea. And so what this shows is how the money is added to the system and then where the money goes afterwards. So I don't know if it's helpful for you folks, but I really like it because I think it just provides that sense of what's going on with these systems. So we are right now on a 30-year paydown period for our unfunded liabilities. In 2008, around the time of the great financial crisis, we had not been putting enough money into our pension systems. And then, of course, the markets tanked. And some of our economic assumptions that we were utilizing turned out to be a little over-optimistic given subsequent events. So what happened was our liability spiked and we didn't have enough assets to cover it. And so the state, I think, very appropriately embarked on a 30-year plan to pay down those unfunded liabilities. And the great thing is we're over halfway there. In the early years, in order to get on that pay down plan, we had a process of backloading our payments. You can't start paying, a substantial amount on the unfunded liability in 1 year. You have to kind of ramp in. And so that's what we did. But over the years, with reforms that this body has implemented, we've kind of taken that backloaded curve and we've flattened it. We've done that in a couple of ways. And so while we're over halfway, we're also in a more predictable funding path where, if all of our assumptions are met, which they will never be, but if all of our assumptions are met, it's a much flatter trajectory that we're looking at in the future for our pension systems. So this year that's in the books was year 17, and it was a good year for our returns. The pension funds and the OPEB funds earned a return well north of our 7% assumed rate of return. And this really helps us pay down those unfunded liabilities.
That's combined both the state employees and the teachers.
Sorry.
That's both the teachers and the state employees combined?
For the OPEB funds, yes. And for the pension funds, that also includes the municipal.
And Senators Colomore and Fayofsky, you're tiny little boxes right now. So if you have a question, please just jump in with it.
Thank you.
I just wanted to step back to Act 114. That was a really big effort for this body. It was a really big effort for our office. And we are almost fully implemented, which feels really good. The employee contribution increases were staged. And so for the teacher system, they were staged in 3 years and they're fully implemented. We have 1 more year to go with 1 more set of increases for state employees coming next year. But we're almost there. And what that does is it drives additional contributions from employees and it mitigates further what the state needs to pay.
want to offer that we've had a significant amount of turnover since then in this body. And I think the people on this committee are some of the sort of last remaining people that remember that conversation. And so we need to be thinking about, and would appreciate you all thinking about, how we really keep the importance of that decision alive so we don't backtrack on it.
Yeah, I had this body in mind when delivering this. So actually we had a bunch of background slides that I cut out because I know you folks have heard that. As the session starts, I'm happy to do some pension 101, recent history, however you'd like to see it. We're happy to put together any of that.
So Tim, I have a question.
Sir.
I believe the year 2035 would mark sort of the end of this plan that was originally made. Is that right?
2038, almost.
38. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
So now I'd like to move to the kind of check up the report card phase of that was by way of providing some background here. I now want to kind of say where we are. And so we do that through the use of these annual valuations. That's where the actuaries, they kind of look back and they look forward. They look back to see, at the beginning of fiscal 25, we had a bunch of assumptions on what we'd earn on our investments, how many people would retire, people pass away, leave the workforce, all kinds of things. And at the end of the year, we true it all up and we say, okay, well, how many people did retire? How many people left? What did we earn? And that tells us what our funded percentage is for fiscal 25. At the same time, it serves as the basis to project a couple of years forward into this upcoming budget year and say, how much do we need to put into the system to preserve the financial integrity of the system and meet our funding requirements that are set by you folks in state statute. So that's the function of these reports. I have links at the end of this deck. They're on our website. They're endlessly fascinating if you're interested in sort of, what's been going on with our workforces, what's happening, economically. It's a wealth of information that even has plan design. They're fascinating documents if that's your thing. So what I'd like to do here is just kind of give a little snapshot of that data. We've been providing these the past couple of years. I like it because it lets you see, at the highest level, what happened between fiscal 24 and 25 from a demographic point of view and from a financial point of view. And what you'll see on the state side is our active and our retirees kind of increased at about the same rate. And they're kind of hovering almost at 1-to-1, a little bit less, a little bit fewer retirees to actives, but that trend has been moving in the direction of coming closer. Financially, I like the average monthly benefit, so you can see sort of what is the average person receiving in a pension benefit after working for a career with the state. And right now it's just right over $2,000, just under it last year. And then at the bottom, the number that I know everybody's keenly targeted on is how close are we to being 100% funded? And we made a substantial, I think, jump in the past year of almost 2%. So going from 71 to 73% funded for the state system. For the teacher system.
I have a quick question. And this is just coming from the sense that the pension will never actually be 100% funded, but what is the average across the country for the percent funded for state pension funds?
Don't know that answer, but I can picture the graphs in my mind's eye, and I think it's probably around the 80%.
Okay.
Folks have been, it has been a consistent experience across the country after the great financial crisis for funding challenges to be experienced by states. And with tightening up GASB rules, the states have been much more keenly aware of funding these in a predictable and stable way. So the trend is for systems to make progress. Now there are going to be outliers. Some have been over 100% funded or right around. No one's really much over 100%. Some have hovered there throughout. Some, and you probably read about these in the news, have dropped down into, I think, low point in the teens, and we're 30%. So we've avoided that space. I think I don't think we're below the average, but we're making steady progress. And I think that's the important part.
Great, thank you.
Do you recall what the percentage was, the unfunded liability when Act 114 was implemented? Like how much ground was made up as a percentage?
Oh, gosh,
In the valuation.
Is it?
There's a graph that I have later in the presentation that'll show it pictorially. I want to say the teachers was down around 50%.
Yeah,
Okay.
61 was the state.
And state was down around 60. So we've made substantial gains. And if you recall, that was a year we had an experience study right before that. And we lowered our assumed rate of return. And what that does is it substantially increases the liability. And so that 2020 year was really the low point. State really committed to some reform efforts. And we've seen nothing but improvement since that time.
And 100% means not like what the accrued liability. The 100% means that the value is equal to the accrued liability. But what is the accrued liability exactly? Because it's not
change every year.
right? It's just that yearly cost.
Every year that long-term liability is going to change because things are going to happen. If you're going to have another year of experience, salaries are going to rise, people are going to come on, leave. And so every year we expect roughly at about the rate of payroll, 3%, we expect an increase in that amount, and we expect assets to increase as well. So it's not like if we're 100% funded, we don't have all the money sitting in an account
30 years.
for 30
I
years.
think that's what some people think.
Yeah, we if all of our assumptions are met, we expect that money will continue to grow over that time period as it's invested consistent with Jppoc's investment mandate. So the snapshot in the teacher system, we have seen a slight decline actually in our active population, not huge this year, but down from 10,567 to 10,526. Our retirees have gone up. So we do have a few more retirees to actives, and we always like to keep a look at that sort of active to retiree ratio. One thing doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. It's really the sign of a maturing plan when you get closer to that 1-to-1 ratio. And so that's what we have in the state and the teacher system. The VEMR system, which is a little younger and which still has employers coming on, we're not quite up that level. You'll see in a future slide. Again, the average monthly benefit it's pretty similar to the state system, just over $2,000. And importantly, the funded ratio has improved over 2% in this past year. And particularly for this system, I think that's great news. So kind of getting down to the basics about what we're asking this year on behalf of the pension systems for the legislature to fund. For the state system, that amount goes up from about $4 million, from 151.5 to 155.5. And for the teacher system, it goes up about $8 million from 227.8 to 239.5. And you'll see underneath it has the funded ratios. If you do it on a percentage basis, the state's going up between 2 to 3%, and the teachers is going up between 3 to 4%. So like I said earlier, how we started with a backloading plan for payments, and we've been flattening that out. Well, this shows how it's being flattened. We're right on par with our basically inflation when you're going up around 3%. So on a real basis, this is about a flat level funding recommendation. And here's what I was referring to, the graph represented by Ron. You see down there, 2020 was the low point. And what is encouraging here is, how long it's been since we've been at this level. It's been since 2016 for the state system and 2011 for the teacher system. So again, if there's a question about, what we did with Act 14 and is it working, I think you can look at this slide and be really assured that it is. Kind of separate the municipal system out a little differently because the legislature does not fund the municipal system. Our municipalities fund those, and it's funded in a slightly different way. Whereas for the state and the teacher system, we have the actuaries determine what the necessary amount is. We present that to you, and then the state funds it. We calculate it for the municipal system, but the way it's funded is the legislature sets the employee rates and the VEMR's board sets the employer rates. It's what we call a stated rate system. And so it doesn't necessarily track the actuarially recommended amount. At present, we're not fully paying the actuarial recommended amount. We haven't for a while. And what we are doing, what this body did last year, was work with the treasurer's office, the employee groups, the VEMR's board. We came up with a package where for a 4-year period between fiscal 27 and 2030, employers and employees would add another 25 basis points to their contributions, and that would step up gradually. We've been doing that before. We're continuing to do that. I expect we will have more of that, not this year, but in the future. And that's been a really successful tool. If you look at this next chart, if you look at this projected out line, before that last package of increases, that was pretty flat. It wasn't getting any better. It wasn't getting worse, but it wasn't getting any better. What that last package of increases did was to kind of turn that slant upwards. And so while we're not projected to get the full funding in 2038, I think if I'm looking at the graph right, we're a little bit shy of 90%. As Treasurer Jppoc will always say, what we're really concerned about is the trajectory. Are we making progress or are we sliding? The VEMR's funded percentage have been sliding. This year, going back to that last slide, you see slight progress, not as much as in the other systems, but still a good news story. So what do we take away from that? Again, this year, strong returns, over $600 million in investment earnings. And if I can skip to the bottom there, all of our all of our plans are cash flow positive net of investments. What that means is, go back to that bucket that we had at the beginning of the presentation. What the employees and employers are putting in is enough to cover the benefit payments. So that means everything we're earning in our investments is going to pay down those long-term liabilities. That's a very strong position to be in. And it's a good position to be in at this point in our 30-year funding plan. Because as everyone knows from a mortgage, at the start, you're just paying interest, right? You're just kind of treading water and you're not seeing your principal balance go down. This is the point where you start seeing that progress being made. Another thing to note is that we smooth our investment gains over roughly a 5-year period. So we don't recognize all of our gains in 1 year. And in this year, between the 3 pension systems, we have over $165 million of the deferred investment gains. Think of that as a tailwind behind you as we're going into next year's. Who knows what's going to happen this year? I think I don't have to tell you of all people who knows what's happening this year. So that's a great position to be in, right? Before we expect to earn our 7%, but if we earn it, we've got extra that we'll recognize. If we don't, we've got something to fall back on. Our increases in our ADEX, that amount that the actuaries are recommending, it's stabilized. And as I said before, the plans are cash flow positive. And it's important, the rating agencies see it. I wish I had an updated quote. We're meeting with the ratings agencies.
Today, right?
I think it was a couple days ago or yesterday, but so we don't have the reports. But so I still use the one from last year, but same idea. They're seeing it and we're making progress and it's working. So, I mean, if anyone has any more pension, I think we can come back to it. I'm going to turn a little bit to our healthcare.
I have a question. Is there somewhere where we can see where those funds are being invested? Like what, how much fossil fuel investment is there? How much what are the investment areas?
That would be a much better question for Jppoc, from a pension investment commission. That's not something I have a day-to-day activity in. They do publish all that on their website. I couldn't refer you to something specific off the top of my head.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Great.
And I guess I'll add sort of towards that same end. I've received some questions from other members about the investment and private equity firms, and curious.
Yeah, that was actually why I've also received this question. So thank you, Chair Cormiser.
Yeah, and I mean, at the highest level, Jppoc works with a consultant to kind of set their asset allocation. One piece of that is private equity. And in fact, that's an area where Jppoc has delivered substantial results. It helps us earn that 7% rate of return. I think over the past 2 years, they've been recognized as having the highest returns in that space in the country, which is great. So, you know, it's a component of the overall portfolio. And if you want sort of more information on how they go about finding those, I would refer you to Jppoc.
I think that might be useful to hear at some point. You know, I really appreciated the diagram and the conversation you had at the beginning about how important pensions are for the stability of the state and for Vermonters. And private equity, in certain cases, can be incredibly damaging to the, you know, livelihood and quality of life for Vermonters. And so just want to make sure we're balancing those things out. And I know that diving into the individual investment decisions with a portfolio of this size is
Generally, our system is set so that that's a very rigorous process, sort of that's outside of the political space, kind of really focused in utilizing consultants to kind of make recommendations. And I know Jppoc is engaged with the entities that it does invest in. They have a very active engagement program to make sure that where they can plug in and drive positive change, they do that.
That's great. Thank you.
OPEB, a great acronym.
It is. It's one of the better ones.
Other post-employee benefits. So that's primarily just think healthcare. Whenever I'm saying OPEB, retiree healthcare. Historically, so as I mentioned earlier, that's provided that is a benefit for the state employees and teachers, not for the municipal employees. So we're just in state and teachers when I'm talking about OPEB system funding. And historically, we have funded this on a pay-as-you-go basis.
Can you explain what that means? I feel like that's like a shorthand that folks use around this building that I don't think is actually understandable. I mean, if anyone in the general public is possibly watching this meeting, if they're acting, I can imagine.
So back in the YouTube hits.
So going back to our plumbing analogy, take the yellow stream out. Actually, I'm going to move away.
That's
from that. It takes away a source of revenue. Apologies.
Pay-as-you-go does.
Pay-as-you-go does because we're not receiving any investment earnings. So when you're taking current year budget revenue, using current year funds to pay for current year benefits, you're not socking away any for the future, and you're not driving earnings on that amount that you're socking away. So that's what pay-as-you-go means. So one of the key and probably the most valuable parts of Act 114 in terms of the savings it generated was putting the state on a path to pre-fund our OPEB benefits. The time period there, whereas our pensions are set to be paid off by 2038, the time period for our OPEB plans is 2048. And by making that change, saved over $1.7 billion. The challenge there, as I think everybody's feeling, is that as healthcare costs are rising and rising and rising, that's going to be reflected in our OPEB funding. There's no magic that would insulate our OPEB plans from the costs of increasing healthcare. So it's really important to, what you saw with the pension systems was stabilization in what we're paying. That's not the case with the OPEB plans this year, but that's not a sign that things aren't working. In fact, that's a sign that things are working, because when costs are going up and up and up, they have to be reflected. Otherwise, we're not putting enough money away to pay for those future benefits.
You're talking to the care board about reference-based pricing and sort of how long they see, like how long a timeline they imagine we would see returns from that. They were thinking like 3-4 years out, maybe 5. Is that part of any of the analysis as you're projecting out?
Not really. As we're looking at our, we call them healthcare trend rates, what our actuaries do is they develop a step down year over year prediction for about 13 years.
13?
13 years, yes. And so there's this conclusion that in the long run, healthcare spending is going to be about increasing by 4.5%. It'll be a little bit over inflation because
It seems very low.
it does, but when you think about it from a macroeconomic point of view, if it keeps going up at an 8 or 9%, our whole economy is going to be healthcare.
Yeah.
So at some point, that can't happen. So in the near term, the assumptions they're using are about 9.5%, depending if it's non-Medicare or Medicare. And then they step down to that long-term projection of about 4.5 gradually over the years. So for these near-term years, they're projecting that rate increases will remain high. So I have a similar charts, and not going to belabor it except for the bottom percent, which I think is very encouraging. For our state system, I think at the time of Act 114, we were a couple percent. We had some modest amount of funds from our ECRA plan in the fund, but at this point, we've gone up to 16.6% funded, and for the teachers' plans, we've gone up to 13.5% funded. So what's I think most interesting, and folks may forget, is that back in the mid-teens, the teachers' healthcare benefit was funded with an interfund loan. So it actually had a negative balance in the fund. Let me just skip to that. You can see on this chart that yellow line is below zero because it was being funded with that interfund loan. So not only were we not earning anything on our funds, but we were not being able to use other funds because they were committed to this purpose. So, you see where that line really took off, and it's right at the time of Act 114.
The OPEB funds invested separately and kept separately?
They are. So going back to the old days, because we just had modest amounts in them, we used to invest them alongside of other small trusts that the Treasurer's Office manages in what we call a trust investment account. And it's not managed in the same way that Jppoc is. It's a much more traditional, conservative, kind of more geared toward preservation and modest yields.
Is it by the Treasurer's Office?
Yes. Since Act 114, we pulled it out of that TIA, and we are investing it in the Treasurer's Office in a manner that's more analogous to Jppoc. But as you'll see later, one of the things we're going to come and hopefully talk to you folks about this year is a plan to move that over to Jppoc to get access to all of the sort of resources and professional expertise that they have over there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
And the boards that we have for teachers and state employees, they don't deal with OPEB, or do they also deal with OPEB?
They do deal with OPEB, yes.
For their respective groups of employees.
Yes. In fact, the past 2 days, we had our board meetings, teachers yesterday and the state meeting today, where we reviewed. So this is very hot off the press. We just approved these yesterday and today, these 2027 numbers. And so what you see here, contrary to the story on the pension systems, these are substantial increases. I mean, there's no way around that. But it's basically driven 100%. When you look at the reconciliation of how we get from last year to this year, it's in the states, in both systems, it's driven by the trend assumptions, what we were just talking about, what our predictions of future healthcare growth are. And in the teacher system, we had some challenges with our renewal this year, and our Medicare rates have gone up substantially. And so that's reflected in there as well. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And this is just those funding graphs that we showed a little bit ago. So I'd like to talk, maybe take an opportunity to credit some of the great work that our office has done over the past summer to try and mitigate some of these costs. There's a difference between the state and the teacher system with respect to who procures health insurance. For the state system, because we have DHR doing it for the active employees, DHR does it for the retirees as well. And sort of our office kind of bills it through our pension checks, and we're more in that role. We're not in the plan oversight role for the state system. We are for the teacher system, which makes sense because we wouldn't want a bunch of disparate school employers doing that. We want a centralized place to do that. So that's in our office, and that's something we do. This year, we had, for our Medicare population, we had a cap in place of a 10% rate increase, but I'm sure everyone's heard about what's going on in the marketplace here. When we were presented a renewal in July, we received a 50% increase in our rates, and it was sort of a bombshell in the office. Just imagining what that impact on retirees would be, imagining what that impact on state budgets would be. So we did a lot of work to run a bid process quickly and efficiently. And after doing that, we decided to make a change in our Medicare insurance provider. So that is now we're transitioning January 1st to a group called HealthSpring from VBA. If you've seen recent news where VBA is not operating in the state anymore, I'm very glad we did that work. I'd be very nervous if we had received that headline without having been proactive about it. When we look at what we're saving in premiums, it's about $11 million. And when you think about, because of the subsidy structure of our health insurance, think about 70-30%. State picks up about 70% on average. Retirees pick up about 30% on average. So that shares off to, state is saving, or state in expenses paid is saving 7.8 million in this upcoming year, and members are going to save 3.2 million. And importantly, for budget writers, the impact on the ADEC I was just showing you that had gone up from 80 million to 100 million. We asked our actuaries to do a rough analysis. It would have gone up to over 120 million. So by making that move, we were able to shave over $20 million off of our ADEC and over $200 million off of that unfunded liability.
I have a question that may actually be better for someone else, but I'm not sure whom. And that is, a lot of times those savings are found by less coverage or less physicians or practitioners that actually take the healthcare. So I'm wondering what this change means for the benefits that the retired teachers receive.
Thank you for that question. We are sort of starting point when we went out to bid was to match current benefits. And that's what our providers done. They've matched current benefits. So in a couple places, there are some enhancements as well. The network, as you talked about, is different. Anytime you're going to go to a provider, we're going to have a different network. But importantly, for the plan we procured, it's a nationwide passive PPO, and the in-network benefits are the same as the out-of-network benefits. So even if you're going to someone who's out-of-network, that benefit payment is going to be the same from this entity. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
That was a critical piece of this as we were setting off on this. I mean, our board was not interested in a conversation where we were going to substantially change the benefit structure. What we were looking for was to maintain the current plan. And we did that because, frankly, we're moving to a bigger company. They have a higher star rating, meaning they, when CMS reviews them, they perform better. And that's often on a lot of member-facing metrics. So we're now a couple months into the implementation process, and I've seen them, very responsive to our inquiries, where, there were instances where, providers were unsure of who they are. They've been going out and doing provider education. We set them up with Vermont Medical Society to go to the conference, meet providers. They're doing outreach. We're taking all steps that we can think of to really publicize this amongst the provider community. So if someone's not in their network, they can get familiar with them. It's been a really impressive, and this is not to brag because our director of operations, Nicole Weidman, has been really spearheading this effort and is doing a great job just with a retiree first mindset, thinking, how do we make this as seamless? It's stressful. It's going to be stressful. And so we're trying to make it as minimal as possible.
Given how stressful it would be for anyone who's the person receiving the health insurance, and that, feedback to government, often you get more of the complaints than the praise. How has it gone for the beneficiaries from your perspective?
I think so. It's always dangerous to ask,
Yeah,
right? Because you're right. The folks who think it's great aren't calling up and saying, "Good job." But what we have been doing is making sure to give them the opportunity as much as we can. We've done so far either 6 or 7 virtual sessions, 5 in-person sessions where we're just getting out there in the community with representatives from HealthSpring to answer all questions. I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna move to this for right now because I was going to talk about this work a little bit. So we are doing targeted outreach to providers. We're trying to make sure that, if a provider has not worked with HealthSpring before, that they know them, they know how to build them, they know how that works. We've actually, where there's some network negotiations, we've actually had the treasurer make some calls for us to both sides to help facilitate that. And it's produced results. We have a website that's linked. This document is on your website, and you can link to our website where we're trying to just put as much information as we can up there in a way that's, orderly and can help people get their questions answered. And I was talking to our operations director the other day, and I think she's convinced that everyone has her personal number because at this point she's getting texts 7 days a week and calls and answering them. It's really important for our office that this goes well. And I think that it is, all things considered. If you are hearing anything, I would ask you to send folks to us. Between us and HealthSpring, we're trying to just get right back to people as quickly as we can. Yeah, and that's encouraging to me.
Yes, very much so.
So I think it's an opportunity for government to prove itself, and I think we take that really seriously in our office, and I'm really proud to work with the group that's working on it. Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear it's going well. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the state employees use traditional Medicare with a additional coverage through the Blue Cross Blue Shield program that the state employees get before they retire, and the state teachers use Medicare Advantage. Is that correct?
Correct.
Was there any exploration into moving the state teachers back to traditional Medicare with that gap coverage like the state employees do, rather than a private Medicare Advantage plan?
I feel like you're just setting them up for me. I'm going to skip ahead to the next slide. So yes, we did. If you look at this slide, the dark blue line, so this is our comprehensive plan. This is the one that most of our Medicare eligible teacher retirees are on. And if you look at that blue line, back in fiscal 19 through 21, it was hovering there in the between $550 and $600 a month. We received a bid for calendar 26 that was up around the $800 mark. So that we did make that effort. We had those discussions when after we received this renewal, and compare that to where we had been for when we went to Medicare Advantage for the first time in 22. We dropped down to below $400. We've been moving up, but as you see for calendar 26, we got that 50% increase, that spike, and that's what we were able to avoid, that steep uptick, by going to what is the purple line. That's representative of HealthSpring. So we did have that exploration, but the costs would have been such that, I think it was almost double. It would have almost been double what we're paying.
HealthSpring is not considered an advantage.
HealthSpring is an advantage. Correct. So what this chart shows, and I think it's a really good visualization. This is the work we're doing in our office to try and manage these costs. We don't have a lot of tools. And what, I was in the office when we moved to Vermont Blue Advantage back in it was challenging. It was a difficult transition, but what's been really impressive to see, and there are folks from Teachers Union here or others, we have not heard that was bad. It hasn't been, folks have been, I think it's been a strong plan. It's worked for our members. And that's why we have an expectation that this will work as well. So thank you for that question. With the non-Medicare, just getting back to this slide, with the non-Medicare members this year, last year's premium increase was low. It was something around 2 to 3% for our non-Medicare population. It was probably too low in retrospect, but it was what was being proposed. And so of course we took it. This year, that increase is up around 20%. When we got the initial increase, I think it was up around 26%, and our board was working with the provider, VHI, who provides insurance for active teachers. One of the things they told us was that they were making a change with respect to GLP-1s that were used exclusively for weight loss. They were not covering that in the active teacher plan. And so our board thought, well, the Medicare plans don't cover it. If the active teachers plans aren't going to cover it, we shouldn't have this one little bubble gap where we are. So it doesn't affect a lot of members, but folks, I'm sure you're aware of the costs associated with these drugs. And so we reduced our premium increase by 2% with that one move that, it impacts less than, I think, 40 people, if I recall correctly. And what that does in the ADEC that we're asking for is it reduces it by $500,000, and it shaves over $4 million off the unfunded liability. So, when I think about that, when I think about what we're doing in the Medicare space, I'm really proud of the work that the office has done to try and manage these costs. If we had just kind of said, we're just going to do what we always have done, I think we'd be coming to you with a substantially larger number. And I'm not sure if it would be measurably better for our retirees. So I think that's an important point that I just wanted to leave you with, is that, I think until we get a handle on health care costs generally, we've used the tools we can. I don't know that we have a ton more. And just to come back to the pre-funding plan, it's working. I mean, between the two plans, we earned over $36 million this past year. That's money that taxpayers will not be asked to fund these benefits. So what are we doing going forward? We are working on this transition like all the time. It's a big lift. If you want to learn more about why we did it, I linked a deck that we had presented to our board that kind of teed up the question. So you can kind of see what they wrestled with when we were looking at it. The website with all our member resources, and please, if anyone's getting outreach, you know how to get a hold of me, and we'll get right back to them. So in 2026, we do plan to come to you with a couple of proposals for legislation. I'm sure when you see create a task force at the start of the deck that, lights up your eyes. But I think this is a targeted ask for a very targeted result. Our 30-year funding policy that would get us to full funding by 2038 actually can increase our volatility as we get closer. Because we take any gains or losses and we spread them out over the remaining period, as we shrink that remaining period, if we have a really bad year, that could have an outsized impact on what we're asking you for the budget, for our ADEC. So outsized that it could really provide substantial challenges. We want to mitigate that before it gets to that point. And we're in a place where we're kind of approaching that 10-year mark where it's a good time to start thinking about it. Plans across the country are doing it. We've already performed some risk assessments with our board that give us some ideas. But what we were thinking in the office was this funding policy has been very effective to really drive a responsible funding policy and practice within the state. So we don't think it makes sense to change it lightly, and we want to make sure that all stakeholders are bought into it. So what we're proposing is a task force that would review the problem, or the concern that there's the possibility of volatility approaching 2038, look at options, how to do it while maintaining funding discipline, and then come back with recommendations for the subsequent biennium. So that's one thing that we're looking at.
You have suggestions for the task force members, I assume?
Yes, we'll have a proposal from our office. And then the second, which I alluded to earlier, is right now, Treasurer Jppoc is the sole investment fiduciary for our OPEB funds. That model is not sort of best practice anymore. It's not, most places use a committee model like Jppoc. Jppoc also has the necessary resources to perform this work and have access to good investment vehicles. So we're going to be proposing to transfer that investment authority from Treasurer Jppoc over to Jppoc. And as a practical matter, we're already working towards that, and Jppoc is helping us with our efforts, and we're performing some studies alongside of them so they can understand the portfolio a little bit better. So those are our main legislative asks in the upcoming year. And then at the sort of summertime, we'll be performing our experience studies. A few years back, at about around the 2020 time, you passed a law that required a experience study to be performed every 3 years. Practice before that had been 5 years. And what these experience studies do is they look at all our economic and demographic assumptions and they say, is this really what we think is going to happen? Do we need to true this up? And at the time you do that, those can have impacts, right? When we lowered our assumed investment return to from 7.5 to 7, that had an outsized impact on our unfunded liability. At present, we're not seeing anything like that on the horizon. But I wanted to flag that we're going to be doing this work in the upcoming year. It's the checkup on the checkup. We have our annual valuations, but every 3 years we make sure those assumptions we're using are appropriate. So we're going to get to work on that now that we've got the valuations behind us. We're going to start scheduling out and making a plan for those. The last ones too in 2023 were a little, at least on some of the demographic assumptions, it was right in the middle of COVID when we were doing that. And it's kind of hard to project mortality when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you don't know what good the current year data is. So we're hoping with some of that behind us, we might have some better data to look at those types of assumptions as well.
Does staff do that, or do you hire like the CFO group?
We have our actuaries. Yeah, they're the leads on that, and we work with them. There's a lot. It's a very back and forth type of there.
I assume that the experience study will be able to answer the question that I have. And that is, in the past, since we made these changes, how often have we been actually over the 7% assumed rate of return?
Past 3 years for sure. And then there was a really bad year. 22 was a really bad year. The year before that was a banner year. I think it was up 25. But these changes aren't, those returns are going to be more driven by macroeconomic, what's happening in the economy generally. I think where I look at with the experience studies and how we're doing is things like retirement rates. Like, are the people we expect to retire, are there more or less retiring? And as a result, are we getting a gain or a loss because of that? If more people retire sooner than we think, we're paying more benefits than we think. And so we're losing money. It's kind of how you can think about it. So we're looking at all of those kind of assumptions and seeing where, and in fact, actually retirement rates is one that, as I look at recent history, that's one where we have seen losses kind of consistently. So I wouldn't be surprised if we say, let's tighten that up. Let's project a few more people than we had previously thought are going to retire each year. And that way, what we're funding at the beginning of the year is a bit more accurate. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
And under Chris Roop's name on the committee's page is the 2 main valuation studies, in addition to the others that you can find at these links here.
And I can make sure that Chris has them to post the rest of them on there as well. But yeah, you can find them all here. And I think with that.
Please send them to me. I'll be the one to keep them.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Great.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any final questions from anyone?